Good evening, everyone. This is a Radulich Broadcasting premiere podcast, Comic Stripped. I'm your host, the mandated reporter, and frankly, I'm mortified, Mr. Mark Radulich. And joining me tonight, my co-host from Honeysuckle Rose Creations, Alexis Hejna. How do you do, madam?
Doing good, and happy Star Wars Day.
Yes, May the 4th be with you. Get it?
Until tomorrow at Revenge of the 5th.
Yeah. I have a coworker who is very excited about tomorrow. She took tomorrow off to eat tacos and shake maracas and wear a sombrero in her house.
Cinco de Mayo, another holiday where white Americans with absolutely no connection to the holiday whatsoever use it as an excuse to get blind, stinking drunk.
Goddamn right.
Right up there with St. Patrick's Day.
Yes. Well, tonight on Comic Strip, we are looking at a direct-to-TV series adaptation. We are going to be looking at the graphic novel and the Netflix series I Am Not Okay With This, which is a coming-of-age comedy drama. The book, you know what, I have the series up. I don't have this information about the book, but the book was written by Charles Forsman, I think back in 2017, if I remember correctly. And the show, which debuted on Netflix February 26th, 2020. And oddly enough, it was only set for, I think, it was an 8-episode series was ordered, but they only did 7 because I think they may have shot 8, but it looks like the way, and we'll talk about the episodes here and then how it ends, but it almost seems like, I think in the case of Titans, they saved the last episode for a season 2 premiere. And this hasn't been picked up for a second season just yet, but the idea is out there that it might.
Which, considering the source material, makes absolutely no sense.
Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons why I pushed this was because this was not one that you were A, particularly enthusiastic about, B, pitched to me. This was one where I saw that there was a one-for-one book to adaptation, and I thought, okay, well, this fits perfectly into the comic strip milieu that we've been doing. So, like, come on, let's do it. Let's bend a little bit, because this isn't really in my wheelhouse either.
Considering the fact that I pretty much twisted your arm to get My Little Pony meets Transformers on this schedule.
Yeah, no, you twisted my arm to get His Dark Materials on the schedule. You did not have to twist my arm at all to get Transformers meets My Little Pony. That was everybody else that objected to it.
Yeah, I was trying to remember. It's like, wait, okay, I know the obvious one on our podcast crew who said that sounded stupid, who shall remain nameless, but I could have swore, I just remember me going in there going, please, 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 please.
Yeah, no, you didn't. I did not have to be convinced to do that one. We'll get to that later this year, presuming it actually comes out on time. But, yeah, this was a coming-of-age teen drama with 2 out of the 5 kids from It, which I thought was kind of fun.
Congrats to these kids. They're getting some real work, and I'm glad to see that they are genuinely good actors.
Yeah, no, I have to say, like, normally with shows like this, I struggle with some of the performances. I have to say, every single person, I think, on this show gives good performance. I don't think there's really anybody here who I was, even like the little brother, he wasn't pitchy or anything. I thought, they all handled the drama pretty well. I think they handled it better than, some of the characters on, like, Lock and Key and whatnot. Some of the other things that we've talked about that have a largely teen cast. But I'm getting ahead of myself here. The book is a one-shot graphic novel that's drawn in a very simplistic format. You're an art person. What would you call that? I mean, it definitely sort of mimics the Sunday Funnies look, but I didn't know if it had a particular term.
I'm not really sure what you call it with a particular term. I personally call it the I grew up watching Popeye style.
Yeah, the lead character looks a little olive oilish. And so the premise of the book is you have this teen girl who lives with her mom, her widowed mother. The father committed suicide a year ago. In the book, he was a veteran. She lives with her widowed mother and her little brother, and she's a high school student. She has a best friend, and they play around with the idea that she may or may not be gay, even though she hooks up with a boy whose name is Stan, and he's kind of a pothead and a dork. Her best friend is currently involved with a high school jock who's kind of a bully to her. And over the course of the book, she just sort of takes you through the walk of her life. You know, here's me in school. Here's me with this. And she's got a journal that her teacher gave her to help deal with, presumably, some of her, her emotions, her trauma, etc. And so the point of view is told through her writing in this diary. Like, the first line of the book is, "Dear diary, fuck you," which is always a good way to start a story. It's immediate hook. Over the course of the book, she ends up kissing the best friend, which becomes very awkward. She hooks up at one point with a female cashier at the grocery store, and she's involved with that for a while, but then that goes sideways. I think her and Dina, correct me if I'm wrong, Dina's the best friend, have some sort of falling out, and almost immediately thereafter, she's confronted by Dina's high school jock / bully boyfriend and his buddy, and they, of course, bully her. And here's what you need to know about her. In addition to kind of being an awkward teenager who is struggling with her sexuality, she's also a psionist. She has psychic powers. She is able to do telekinesis. And she can move stuff with her mind. And it comes out like most dirty, stinking muties. She comes out when she's angry, when she's stressed, when she's overly emotional. And so she's confronted by this bully, and she gets pissed off, and she knocks one of them down, and the other one, I think, she blows its head off, right?
More or less.
Yeah. So she's killed the boy. She's sort of made a mess of her relationships, and she's made a mess of her relationship with her mother. And so she goes to this point in the town she lives in, climbs up on this pedestal type thing, and then she uses the power on herself and commits suicide. So that's the book. The show takes a lot of the girders of that story. The psionist powers are kept the same. The dead father is kept the same. A lot of the bits and pieces they leave out the cashier. Her relationship is mostly with Stan, and that's kind of on again, off again. Stan finds out about her powers, and he tries to mentor her because he's steeped in comic book knowledge.
Yeah, I get the feeling that whoever was given the assignment to turn the book into the series watched way too much Legion.
So this was directed, developed by Jonathan Entwistle and Christy Hall. I have no idea what they've worked on. They have no Wikipedia links. So, just to get to the end of the series, like I said, and we'll talk about this a little bit more in detail as we go through it. But the bones of it are the only thing that really gets left out that's a major piece of this is the cashier. That never happens in the series. Over the course of the series, she has a few different outbursts with her powers, and at one point she is at least in part responsible for Dina and the boyfriend breaking up, and so now the boyfriend's out for revenge, and he steals her journal, and he embarrasses her at homecoming, and she says, "Shut up, shut up, shut up, shut up," and his head blows off.
And I'm not going to lie, there was some satisfactory moments there for me, because I got picked on like crazy growing up.
And I think that's definitely grist for the mill to talk about for this. That that the story does speak to those who are bullied and feel awkward and all of that. In any case, it ends with her. In the book, there's nothing like this. They establish in the series towards the end that somebody is following her who keeps turning into smoke. Not really sure who or what this is. It's never established. But after she blows this poor kid's head off, and she goes running, and she runs to the same precipice that she does in the book, but instead of killing herself, she is confronted by whoever this being is who tells her she should be frightened, and then it ends. So let's get into it. First, let me ask you, and I've been talking for a while, break down the book for me. What did you like? What didn't you like? What spoke to you?
This was one of the weirder books I think we've ever read. And it's so weird. I was mentioning this before. I knew nothing about it going into it. I hadn't seen the trailer for the show or anything. It was just like, okay, Mark wants me to read this. I'm going to read it. And as I started reading it, I got this sense of catharsis out of it. Again, I got picked on like crazy growing up. All my friends did. We were a bunch of losers. And I was in the writers club in high school, and I read through so many pieces where people talked about how things would be better if they committed suicide. And frankly, you quickly learn the difference between I'm actually serious, I need help, and oh, my life's a drama and I'm poetic. Seriously, if you need help, call the National Suicide Hotline. But for the love of God, stop bugging us with your poems about it, okay? Sorry,
wow.
That made me sound horrible.
Hey, sissy boy, keep your thoughts to yourself. No one wants to hear you crying.
No, I'm sorry. Also, in college, I edited the Student Film Network, and oh my God, all the short films I had to go through where people were talking about how horrible their lives were and how they should end it. And again, it's like you quickly learn the difference between I genuinely need help and, oh, I think I'm deep.
So real quick, I wrote for the school magazine, and the school magazine, not the school paper. The school magazine was fiction, short stories, poems, that sort of thing. It was nice. A collection of creative writing, and yeah, thank you. And I was an editor on that, and I contributed to it for the few years that I was in high school, and it was around. And I remember like one year, I had a couple of different things published, and my dad read it, and he came back to me. He was like, "Why is everybody in your school so depressed?"
Exactly. Okay, every year in Writers Club, we held a performance at the end of the year where we let people send in their best poems, short stories, whatever, and we would read them. And I remember my senior year, I finally got to host it, and I told my parents I really wanted to be there. My mom's like, so I got to sit through an hour and a half of suicide notes. Because, yeah, exactly. She was just like, okay. She's like, my parents were like, okay, Alexis, your writing is great, but we really don't want to listen to endless amounts of depressing teenager poetry. We're going to hit our limits. There's a reason I can't stand listening to Billie Eilish, because she sends me flashbacks to looking through all that crap.
There's a bit in Family Guy, and I can't remember what the setup is, but Peter says something to the effect of, quit being so sad, life ain't so terrible. But yes, sad high schools, go.
So again, reading it, it came across to me like this was somebody getting so much off their chest from a living hell growing up, and you feel this sense of connecting with the author at first, because again you're like, wow, this really sounds like you're pulling out some demons to try to make your life better. But then I started reading more about the author, who's also written wrote the series The End of the Fucking World, which is also on Netflix, and looking at more of his stuff, and I was like, wait a minute, you don't really come across as somebody who needed to get this shit off your chest.
You're talking about the person who adapted it, who developed the show.
No, I'm talking about Charles Forsman.
Oh, okay. Because Charles Forsman wrote the book, but it was developed and produced by two other people.
No, the guys who adapted it clearly wanted to make the next teenager superhero drama, and like I said, I've obviously been watching way too much Legion. No, I'm sorry. I will have my words when we get to the series. But again, it really threw me for a loop when I started looking up more about the author. I mean, first of all, I'm just going to say, it's like, oh, this was so deep and passionate. It was written by a guy. What the hell? Because this really came across as something of one of my girlfriends in Writers Club would have written when we were fucking 15.
So, here, I want to share this with you. Yeah, you're right. I take that back. You're absolutely right. Charles Forsman wrote the graphic novel, The End of the Fucking World, which was... That's where I got confused, because that was also developed into a Netflix show. He wrote Celebrated Summer, Hobo Mom, Slasher, Revenger... And so Charles Forsman was born in Pennsylvania in 1982. He is arguably the most acclaimed talent to come out of the Center for Cartoon Studies. All right. A school founded in 2004 by graphic novelist James Sturm and educator Michelle Ollie in White River Junction, Vermont. Forsman graduated in 2008 and is a two-time Ignatz Award winner for his self-published mini-comic Snake Oil. All right. So that's Charles Forsman.
This is just not the guy that I would have associated with the messages and the stories coming from this book. And the more I started to look at his other stuff, the more I started to wonder, are you actually trying to tell us a story, or are you just tapping into this because you think it'll sell?
Well, let me ask you. You're a girl, right?
Last time I checked.
All right. So, as a girl, and you're seeing this girl portrayed in this comic, there's always the question, did this male author write this female authentically, or is this like their perception of girls and it's completely fucking off? What's your opinion?
It's weird because I could see this being authentic to some girls. This is not, I mean, again, I got picked on and beat up, but I did not live this exact kind of life.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't smoke weed in high school. I didn't even smoke weed in college. It took me a while before I got into that stuff. I didn't lose my virginity when I was 15. But I know there are a lot of girls who do go through that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Especially the issue she had with her, I don't know again if she's gay or bisexual or pansexual or whatever the terminology they were going for is. But I know there is a lot of girls out there who do have those kind of problems relating to that and figuring out, where does the line blur between friend, best friend, and girlfriend?
One of the elements that I picked up on, and this is one of the things that I keyed into, that I think this is authentically something that girls struggle with, but I'm not a girl and I don't want to speak for, I don't want the cisgendered male middle-aged white guy to speak for women. But the struggling with self-esteem, self-worth, throughout this, there's a lot of I am gross. There's a bit where she gets zits on her thighs, which is also in the show. And that's a very private thing for her. In the show, they make a thing of it with her and Stan. It's like a bonding moment. But in the book, it's just a very private thing that happens, and she's like, I am just the most gross, disgusting thing ever. And that's kind of a thing throughout the book is... And a lot of people commented on this when I was reading through comments on Goodreads and whatnot about she's kind of a shit garbage person. and she calls herself out on her shit garbage behavior. So when she finally kills herself, you're not, as a reader, I mean, it was jarring just because, like, how often do you see that in a comic book? But, you know, and you've been with this person through the length of the story, and so there's that much too. But, you know, she's saying it, and she's doing kind of shitty things. And so, I mean, suicide is terrible, and I feel bad for anyone that gets to that point in their life. And I'm not saying she should have killed herself, no matter what kind of a shit garbage person she was. But I guess what I'm trying to say is, without help and intervention, I can see how she got to that point. And again, I wonder, when you study it and when you actually capture the data, there's a lot of information out there about, like, teen suicide or at the very least suicidal ideations, teens who have contemplated hurting themselves. Now, that's a far cry from where I started with this before I kind of throw it back to you. I started with struggling with self-esteem, which I think is a pretty universal girl thing. But I think there's also a big leap you can make to some teens, both boys and girls, but we're talking about girls right now, who get to a point of hopelessness.
No, you're absolutely right. I guess just going back to it, like I said, it just really struck me as weird that, again, you have this voice of trouble with self-esteem and body issues and sexuality and suicidal thoughts that capture the teenage girl, and then you find out it's from a guy, it's been written by a man, and it's like, whoa, wait a minute. It's just kind of bizarre. It's like, where does this guy have this idea of what all these girls go through?
Yeah, what gave him his insight?
Yeah, and is he writing this to reach women who went through this when they were younger, or is he writing this because he's just trying to, write something that he knows would sell?
I don't know. I got the impression that there was a legitimate voice here that I think this was written for teen girls as sort of we hear you, we see you, and here's a story that reflects you. That being said, it's kind of a descent. The whole story is. Somebody remarked in one of the comments that I read that, like, the story has no plot. It's just you just follow her until she finally just fucking. You follow her through all of her terrible mistakes and botched relationships, and then she just offs herself. Which she could have easily done with a gun or slitting her wrists. I don't know what the point of, comic books have superheroes and superpowers, of giving her a superpower. Like, I don't know if that really added to the narrative at all.
Exactly. That was the weird part. Again, I didn't know anything about this book when I first started reading it. I did not know that she was going to develop telekinesis or whatever it is. And it just felt a little oddly placed. Like, I'm going to tell this great story about this poor girl who goes through a horrible life, and she just never feels like she belongs. Oh, and by the way, she's got superpowers. She just has so much depression and everything, and she can make things explode in her mind. And she's just so angsty. Yeah,
like, I felt like there was enough grist for the mill without also making her Jean Grey. Like, and that's the one thing that puzzles me about this. Because here's the thing. He does nothing with it. It's there to give her another thing to be anxious about. It's there to solve certain problems in the narrative that that he hurdles that he needs her to go through. When she confronts the bullies in the store, she's drawn as if she's 98 pounds, soaking wet with rocks in her pocket. So she can't physically confront these guys. So essentially, he gives her a loaded gun that narratively he uses whenever it's convenient. But that's it. It would be one thing if she were the perfect girl and with the perfect life, and suddenly she develops. And this is a lot of X-Men stories, right? You know,
Oh, yeah.
she develops this power, and her whole life is turned upside down. That's a classic narrative. That's something where the powers are necessary to move the narrative. You could have taken the powers out of this, and at the end she just gets a gun and blows her head off, or she hangs herself, and gotten to the same place without any of that other stuff. And then the only issue you have is when she's confronted, how does she kill the bully? And again, you could have easily changed that to where she can do something physical. Again, she gets a hold of a gun, and she shoots him in the store, and she leaves quickly enough, and then she goes to the thing and she shoots herself or whatever.
Yeah, her powers really don't have that much of an impact when you take it out. I'd also like to add that I am not a fan of this author's way he layers her narration over other people's situations. For example, you have the scene where Dina is talking to her boyfriend in the car, and we don't actually see them. We just see the car, and we see the little, text bubbles where they're talking. But we also have Sid's narration over it, and it really screws with you when you're trying to keep pacing on both of them and keeping the mindset, I mean, it's like I get flashes of her making out with Brad, and it's gross and revolting. It's like a fly buzzing around my head. I hate him. Why can't she see how shitty he is? And then, but they're talking, it's like, don't mock me. Sorry, princess. I was just teasing. God, it's like, it's emotional whiplash.
Yeah. I said she's kind of a shitty person. What did you think of Sid, the character in the book?
Please forgive me for this. She came across like a rather angsty, whiny teenager who's going through some hardships and is incredibly hormonal and really needs to be bitch slapped back to reality.
Okay. So, again,
I'm sorry. I grew up reading the poetry of so many people who acted like Sid, minus the actual suicide, and always talked about how their lives were so rough and how they were so angsty and so deep. And I just wanted to look at them like, you do not even know what true angst is. Do me a favor and shut the hell up.
Well, it does beg the question then, doesn't it? Was the author trying to elicit sympathy for this person and then create a sad, depressing situation when she finally kills herself? Or was he sort of holding a mirror to that kind of personality and saying, this is what they are, warts and all, and you should be aggravated and disgusted by them? And I honestly have no idea what he's going for here.
I don't either. And maybe that's what makes it so hard to swallow the whole book. You don't really know. Is he trying to be the voice of a generation? Is he poking fun at those who are so angsty and, going through emotional high school hell? And you know what? Yeah, we all go through hell in high school. We're hormonal, we're changing, we're upset, we don't know what we want with our lives. I know that everyone in high school occasionally does go through the why me bout.
Anything else about the book you want to talk about? Because then, if not, we'll talk about the show.
Really not a fan of the artwork.
Okay. Not you don't read the Sunday Funnies?
The way he designed two teenagers having sex and one of them going down on her was basically just seeing her butt and his hands. It was weird.
So I just want to read this one comment here on Goodreads. At a certain point, as a lesbian, I get tired of meeting lesbian characters whose entire story builds up to a violent and tragic climax. As someone who suffered depression, I get tired of meeting mentally ill and struggling characters whose entire story builds up... Okay, it's a repeat. As an AFAB person, I get... Okay, no, I'm sorry. She repeats the same thing, but it says, as someone who blah, blah, blah. Let me try this one more time. Take two. We'll fix it in post. At a certain point, as a lesbian, I get tired of meeting lesbian characters whose entire story builds up to a violent and tragic climax. As someone who suffered depression, I get tired of meeting mentally ill and struggling characters whose entire story builds up to a violent and tragic climax. As an AFAB person... What's AFAB?
I have absolutely no idea.
Good, moving on. I get tired of meeting female characters whose entire story builds up to a violent and tragic climax. I mean, yeah.
I guess there is some truth that when we see characters that in our deep down we do kind of relate to, either by we went through something similar or we cannot put ourselves in their shoes, we do want them to overcome this stuff. We want them to have, some kind of satisfaction in the end. It is hard to watch something and see someone so angsty, so upset, and then nothing works out for them at the end. I think deep down, we like happy endings, and we want our characters to have happy endings. I know life doesn't always give us happy endings. In fact, life very rarely gives us happy endings, but I think that's what we want to see more in our fiction.
One element that I did want to talk about before we move on was how it dealt with the suicide of the father. So here you also have, the classic veteran who comes home from the war and struggles with PTSD and then finally, just can't handle it anymore and takes his own life. All too common, very, very sad, kind of a black mark on how we deal with the veterans who fight for this country, and this is not going to turn into another thing. I think you can absolutely support the soldiers without supporting the war if that is how you feel. That said, trauma, post-traumatic stress disorder, the horrors of war, and the aid and comfort that we give soldiers when they come back after dealing with such things is a real problem in this country. And the book kind of deals with that. It definitely kind of, it's like in a room off to the side of the story, and occasionally the author opens the door, we peek inside, we see that it's terrible, and then they shut the door just as quickly.
See, I didn't think he committed suicide. I think, so in the book, Sid goes down into the basement. He's curled up in a ball crying underneath the stair. Yes, I'm obviously picking up some serious PTSD vibes here. He was in so much pain. He pleaded with me to make it stop. I could hear him even though his mouth wasn't moving. He was like me, and he knew. That's how he knew I might understand and help. He told me how to do it. It's hard to explain. I wouldn't know the words. I did it for him. I set him free. But I miss him. I miss him so much. I think Sid used her powers to kill him. I think it was like an assisted suicide.
Okay, well, that's a detail of the book that I glossed over then, or it just didn't connect with me. Well, that's interesting. In the show, I think he definitely committed suicide, didn't he?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Well, let me put it this way. If he didn't, then they're saving that for season 2, if it does come. Because we never actually get a lot of detail, only that the mother found him in the basement. Yeah.
I think there's a couple of different ways they can deal with this, because in the show, they talk about how the dad developed those powers, too. And that part of what might have driven him to insanity was the inability to control those powers and, the side effects of them, and he just, on top of everything else, it all just came tumbling down for him. All right. So, like I said, the book is a mixed bag. I didn't mind the artwork. I sometimes like a very minimalist style. I'm certainly a fan of Sunday funnies like BC, For Better For Worse, Peanuts, that sort of thing. I didn't mind this, especially when you're so used to, Marvel and DC type artwork, that, this was kind of again, a minimalist breath of fresh air.
I don't mind minimalist art. I mean, I do love the Peanuts and a lot of the comic strips you see in the Sunday paper. This just artwork, maybe it was just the design of the characters in particular. It just didn't do anything for me. Okay.
The show, but like I said, the book narratively is kind of a mixed bag. It has definitely, like on Goodreads, it's got a 3.29 out of 5 stars. And like, if you just look at the first couple, it's like, I gave it 3 stars. The first rating on this was like 4 out of 5, 4 out of 5, 2 out of 5. 2, 2, 1, 2. A lot of people seem to have come to the book. There's a couple of 1 stars right in a row. A lot of people seem to have come to the book from the show. And the show was pretty well received. At least critically, according to the Wikipedia page, the Rotten Tomatoes aggregate score, and again, I want to remind people, in case you don't listen to Damn You Hollywood, Rotten Tomatoes takes all the scores from nationally recognized critics and runs an average. So the average score from critics on Rotten Tomatoes, if you want to use that as a source, is 86% with 65 reviews. And it gave it an average of 6.8 out of 10. So, not bad. Metacritic gave it a 68 out of 100. It's generally favorable. So, like I said, I think an easy, bingeable 30-minute episode, 7-episode comedy coming-of-age web drama, especially in the middle of all of this nonsense that's going on right now, probably came as like a welcome bit of distraction. And people were like, oh, well, this is based on a book. And then they check the book out, and they were like, yikes, this show is so much better than this book. Because they really took, like I said, the girders of a very straightforward, simple narrative and dressed it up pretty. They fleshed it out. They gave the Sid in this show, played by Sophia Lillis, once again of It fame, is actually pretty charming. Yeah. She has some charisma to her. You feel bad for her situation. You understand when she's making not so great decisions. She shows a lot of heart and earnest when dealing with like her brother or Dina. She treats Stan kind of shitty, but I don't think she knows what to do with him. But overall, I think the Sid in the show did a better job of kind of showing what girls can deal with as teenagers better than the book does.
No argument there. No, this actually, I was going through a lot of the reviews here on Amazon. Hang on, where was that? And a lot of it is don't read the book if you like the show.
Yeah, I can see that. So tell me what your thoughts are. I threw a lot out there. What more did you think of Sydney, Sophia Lillis' Sydney?
I like that we were able to expand on the character so much more through the series. I like that she spends more time with her little brother and actually does like him. In the book, I think she says like maybe 3 lines to him, and one of them she calls him a stupid little urchin. But I like that they gave him a much warmer connection in this, since it's clear that she has to take care of him a lot because of how many shifts her mom picks up to try to take care of them. I mean, in fact, all the characters really got a decent amount of establishing and building him up a little bit. Heck, even Brad the bully actually is turned into a much more developed character. Still a jackass, but yeah.
Yeah, I didn't find him to be as detestable as they make some bullies out to be. I think that was purposeful. I don't think the developers of the show wanted you to totally hate him. Because,
well, I mean, yeah, he doesn't mince words in the book. He insults Sydney left and right the whole time.
Right.
This one, he doesn't really hate Sydney at first. Sydney just hates him because she doesn't realize that she's in love with Dina, and she just hates that he's taking her away from her.
Which is a big part of the book as well.
Yeah. The gloves don't come off until Sid spills the beans and tells Dina that her boyfriend's been cheating on her.
Well, let's talk about that for a second, because the show starts off with, you don't spend too long with Dina and Sid as friends together. In the book, I think they make more of it than they do in the show. In the show, it's like, I had no friends, and Dina, and they do a quick montage And then it's over, and then she's immediately with Brad.
Yeah.
And she's with Brad for the bulk of the show. And it serves the purpose narratively of forcing Sid to confront some awkward situations. It kind of pushes her towards Stan when Stan makes himself available to her. It forces her to kind of contend with her powers, first by herself, then with Stan. There's a lot of that. And so just going back a second, there's a period. It's only 7 episodes, so it's like early on. It's like the first 2, but there's a period early on where they break up. For one reason or another, they take a break or whatever. I know that there's a scene where they go to a party, and Sid and Dina are dancing, and Brad's trying to get Dina away from Sid, and she's like, "I just want to dance." And so he goes off, and unbeknownst to us at the time, he goes off and ends up cheating with a character they don't really do anything else with. She's just sort of there. I don't even know what her name is in the show.
Jenny. Yeah, I think they established her briefly, because, she shows up at the party, and someone says, wasn't she just dropped off at rehab? So
yeah.
That's the joke, is that she fled rehab, and then she shows up at the detention. This is clearly the high school bad bitch, doesn't give a damn about anything kind of girl.
Yeah, and she walks in, they might as well have played Bad Reputation by Joan Jett.
More or less.
So he ends up cheating on Dina with Jenny, and it's a secret for a few more episodes, and then in the detention episode, which was very Breakfast Clubby, it isn't so much that, Sid spilled the beans. He got caught. And Dina basically heard the butt end of that conversation and was like, what the hell? And then, Sid really didn't have a choice at that point. Dina's not dumb. And she more or less heard that he had cheated on her. But it's like she just needed confirmation. And they don't show it, but, there's no way Sid could have said nothing.
Exactly. No, so it's pretty clear that even if Dina didn't hear the bulk of it, Sydney made it absolutely clear she did not lie for him.
Yeah. And that was a big thing. It was like, hey, let's get along for Dina's sake. And I think to her, she tries, but then she walks in on him and Jenny talking about how they had sex, and she's like, she's never really given an opportunity to wrestle with it. It's like, shortly she walks in, and seconds later Dina walks in.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's not a case of Sid walks out and says, Dina, I need to talk to you. No, Sydney just refuses to lie for Brad, because in that situation she's like, no, I have to tell her the truth.
Right. And that's of course causes Brad to seek revenge on her, and then he is hoisted by his own petard murderously. So, anything else about the Sid character? Again, I thought she had a lot of charisma. I thought, she plays tumultuous very well. She's obviously going through a lot. I think I kind of wish they had done more of her coping with the death of her dad, but I feel like they purposely left a lot of that stuff out so they could deal with it in a second season. Which, again, for a show that was adapting a single graphic novel that begins and ends, in one single publication, the idea that they were like, no, we can spin this off into several seasons. It'll be just like House of Cards. This seems odd to me.
Very much so. Again, I saw the end, I was like, where the hell are you guys supposed to be going with this?
Oh, clearly in a completely different direction, because they've covered everything that was in the book.
Pretty much. Did you also notice that they raised the age? In the book, she's 15. In the series, she says she's 17.
Oh, I honestly didn't connect the two. I guess to give...
Yeah, I think standards and practices didn't want a 15-year-old losing their virginity.
It's it's very possible. I thought the kid who played the brother did a really good job. I thought, he played the character with earnest, and he wasn't too whiny, he wasn't pitchy. I thought he did a good job.
I died laughing at the scene. I think it's in the 3rd episode when he's walking with Sid, and he says, "So where's Stanley going to?" "What do you mean? You said he was going down somewhere and he was really good at it." Oh God, I had to pause it. I was laughing so hard. That was a great line.
The other big character in this is, we've mentioned him a few times now, Wyatt Olaf as Stanley Stan Barber. In the
Previously
book,
playing Stan Uris in It.
Yes. He's portrayed in the book as this kind of a nerdy, pot-smoking, quiet, kind of wallflower type. In the show, he is more bohemian.
Yeah, they really didn't give him that much of a character in the book. Sid mentions that he hangs out with people more or less because he's their drug dealer, and they make him do stuff, but he doesn't realize that they're making him do it because he's the joke.
Right.
It's like, "Hey, Sid, I dare you to, eat that off the ground," and Stan, "I dare you to eat that off the ground." Stan's like, "Sure," and he does it, and he doesn't care, but he doesn't realize his friends are laughing at him. And this one, it's clear Stan doesn't have any friends aside from Sid, so. I also like that we get more characterization between him and his dad. I love that he wears those crazy clothes. Oh my God, what was the name of that guy from the band, the Talking Heads, who wore that giant suit in the music video?
Oh, I have no idea. I thought you were going with, like, Flock of Seagulls.
Okay, you're going 80s, I'm going 90s. Showing our ages here. But yeah, that crazy-ass blue suit that he wears. Oh my God. He's adorable. I loved watching his character. It's just like, oh my God, this kid is so stinking cute.
Is he adorable? Is he adorable?
He's adorable.
Oh, he's so adorable. I thought he had like a very bohemian quality about him. Like when we first meet him, she's like, Stan gives no fucks, and he starts following her down the street and walking with her, and he has no shoes on, and I feel like in development they almost wanted to make him on the spectrum, but then like, no, he's the leading man of this series, we can't do that, and so instead he's just artistic instead of autistic.
Not to mention, he and Sophia Lillis really have some great chemistry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do love seeing them on screen together. But I feel so sorry for him because, he loses his virginity to Sid, and then he shows up the next day with those glasses and that beat-up car, and he's like, "Hey, how's it going? What do you want to do?" He has no idea that she doesn't care that she had sex with him. He thinks he has just achieved the ultimate in manhood, and she's crazy about him. It's like, you poor deluded fool.
Well, and that's the thing. Like, we talked about, do you as a girl identify with Sid? I know, like, thinking back to my junior high and high school years, how much I identified with Stan. That you get the attention of a girl you really, really like, and you think now that you have her attention, that's it, the war is won, the job is done, and you guys are a thing. And it's like, no, she needed you in that moment for a very specific thing, and then that's it. And how heartbreaking that is.
I did have a guy, I think it was actually in middle school, that I danced with at a middle school dance. It just we just started dancing, and yeah, the next day he was all over me, and I was like, "I don't even know your last name. We were just dancing together. Please go away." And he, oh my God, I may as well have just like left this poor kid at the altar.
You're a heartbreaker, dream maker. Sorry, heartbreaker, you, Alexis Hejna. Just leaving men in a rut, in a pile of broken hearts and shattered dreams.
Really? Because in the list of serious boyfriends that I've had before I met my husband, I've only actually dumped one.
Moving on. So yeah, I identified with Stan. Like, you sort of you don't. The issue is clearly her. She's wrestling with a number of different angsty things. She's not the least of which is she may at least in part be gay, and so sexuality, especially as a teenager, can be absolutely fluid, and so for Stan, who's probably got a very concrete concept of sex and sexuality, he is a boy, he likes girls, end of discussion. This is black and white. And then you have Sid, who is very much dealing in shades of gray. And then on top of that, she's this roller coaster of emotions. And he's like, she had sex with me, and therefore, it's a very linear. What a guy thing! It's a very linear equation. Penis plus vagina equals couple. That's the math. It's on the whiteboard. and then there's Sid going penis and vagina and couples, and why is there air? You're like, wait, what? So it's all very confusing. I feel for Stan.
Probably one of the most interesting conversations we've ever had on your show.
Sure.
But I am going to take this moment to apologize to everyone who tuned in tonight.
Why are you apologizing? I think we're having a very adult discussion about very serious topics in the lives of teenagers. Things we can all identify with.
Penis plus vagina on the whiteboard, an adult conversation.
I don't know what kind of adults you hang out with. But anyway.
I don't even know if I am an adult, and I'm 35.
But yeah, I thought the kid who plays Stan, Wyatt Olaf, did a really, really great job of playing his character with earnest and sincerity, and I feel bad for him, but he also doesn't overplay it. He hits just the right pitch of likability and nerdiness.
Yeah, he wants to be with Sid, but he's not leechy. He's not like a leech on her. And I love that even at the end when she says, we're not going to be a couple, but we could still be friends. When Brad starts reading Sid's diary, Stan is the first one who comes, besides Dina, who tells him to shut up. He comes charging in saying, stop, you leave her alone, and he gets knocked out.
Yeah.
Even though Sid's not going to be with him romantically, he doesn't want her to get hurt. He still cares about her. And then that was really sweet. I love that he didn't just stand in the back going, I'm not going to do anything about this.
Dina in the book has no character.
Yeah, that's putting it mildly.
In the show, I don't know. I kept thinking, and this just might be because of the physical look of the actress. I kept thinking about Sabrina the Teenage Witch, the Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. I kept thinking about Sabrina's African American friend, Roz.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I got like a Roz vibe from her. And again, it might entirely be driven by the fact that both actresses look, in my mind, a lot alike.
I could see that. She does look a lot like the actress. They have very similar facial styles, very similar hair. I don't want to say I related with Dina, but I related with the situation between Sid and Dina. See, growing up, I was actually skipped a year. I was a year younger than everyone else in my grade, which was fine until I got to 7th grade and all the girls hit puberty and I didn't. But at the same time, I lost a lot of friends because they sort of found themselves a lot sooner than I did. I remember still, not really knowing who I was growing up, and they already had figured that out. And I think that's kind of where it is with Sid and Dina. They're friends. They understand each other. They get along. But Dina not only has obviously come into her body a lot more easily, but she's attracting the popular football player, and she is able to sort of just blend into the popularity group a lot easier now. Whereas Sid is still struggling to figure out where she is, who she is, and what she's supposed to be doing during high school. And it's also hard for her because now she doesn't even have her best friend who's also going through that.
Yeah.
So yeah, watching those two, that part, I just sat there going, "Yeah, holy crap, that was my life."
So the last thing I want to talk about, and then we can start to wrap up, unless you have a lot of burning desires, we'll keep going, is how they use Sid's powers in the show. They definitely make more of a big deal about it in the show. Like, in the book, I feel like she's more struggling with the loss of Dina and her sexuality, and she's just kind of, and the death of her dad, and she's just kind of struggling with making good moral decisions and not being a bag of shit. In the show, I feel like absent of these X-Men type powers that she's going through, X-Men type struggles, she kind of had a handle on things. She was perfectly willing to, like, there's a bit in there where she just kind of gets to the point of, I'm just going to be happy. I am tired of being miserable. She kind of pulls a Tony Stark. Turns out resentment is corrosive and I hate it. And so she's legitimately just trying to be okay with life. The problem is, you're a teenager and you're just a ball of emotions, even in the best of situations. And whenever she gets emotional, she freaks out and knocks over bookshelves or, an entire forest full of trees and Stan's car.
Or bowling balls into the wall. And I did also notice, in the book, her powers seem much more isolated. I was getting more Scanners or the movie Rubber, where she was just making little explosions or putting a little pressure, like when she gives Brad a nosebleed. This, I don't recall in the book anytime she actually had full-blown telekinesis making shit fly.
She does it to the bully at the end. There's two bullies in the store. One, she just, kind of does a ebony maw and kind of waves her hand, and he goes flying off. That's two Avenger references. And then she crushes Brad's brain or whatever it is she does.
Okay. Like, so that was just more what I got out of it. I get the feeling that when this series was put forth to Netflix, some executive kind of looked through it and said, okay, blah, blah, blah. Oh, a teenager discovered she has superpowers. Yeah, make a show about that. Well, that's not really the bullet show. Shut up! I want a teenager with superpowers.
Yes. We'll spin her off, we'll put her in with some other teenagers, and we'll do Avengers money. It'll be fantastic.
Yeah. Like I said, this is... I can't find any articles from the author about how he felt about this adaptation, or what he thought they did with it, or if he thought they mixed the message, or what he thinks about that they totally went off on his ending or whatever. But I gotta know, I really would love to just sit down and pick his brain and go, so what do you think about the fact they took your angsty teenager who commits suicide at the end and instead have made her into Jean Grey Phoenix Force minus the crazy hair?
I'll tell you this much. I really did kept waiting for Professor X to show up. Sid, how do you how are you talking to me? And I can hear you in my mind. There are more people out there like you, Sid. Like, oh boy. I kept waiting for her to be whisked away to Professor X's school for gifted youngsters.
What did you think about the idea of this shadow person following her, who we never find out who it is, but they show up at the end saying, they should be scared of us or something like that? It's like, I have no idea what they were going with that.
Yeah, look, again, I think they wanted to leave it open-ended. They didn't want to kill her off because what if this is a big giant hit and you've killed your lead? So...
They did that with the Watchmen series, and I think we're all happy they stuck with one, as good as it was.
Well, again, I think the intentions were different. I think going into the Watchmen, they were like one and done. With this, obviously the hope, I think, for the developers was to get more seasons out of this. That, like, let's do the book, and then let's take this in a completely different direction, which is why there's so much emphasis on her powers in this. So I think they had to make a bigger deal out of it. And then about the middle through the end, they start showing kind of in this corner of the screen someone's following her. They do the bit in the library, and all of that. And then he shows up at the end. It's probably something having to do with her dad, if not her dad directly. Like, her dad's not dead. He's in this other ethereal form or some garbage. Who knows?
I'm just saying, I'm going to say this right now. If that's what they're going with, then so help me. Sorry, that is such a stupid cop-out.
Yeah, it's hard because we're not the ones. This isn't a gig for us. You know, we did not spend however many months, developing this show from this graphic novel to sit there and say, well, we only want to do 7 or 8 episodes and then that's it. We'll go on to another gig. I mean, I think artistically, if money is no object and I don't have to worry about gigs, yeah, I want to do more of a strict interpretation of the book and then leave it as a miniseries one and done. I mean, just as an aside, the same weekend that I binged this, I also watched the miniseries Hollywood on Netflix, and that was 7 or 8 episodes, and that's it. That's all it was intended to be. They told this one story, and then they were done. And I feel like this might have been, and this is kind of my only quibble with the show, this might have been a stronger story had they stayed a little stricter to the book in terms of getting her to the point where she's like, there's no way out for me, and she takes her own life, and I think the tragic ending kind of sells the whole story. On the other hand, these are people living in a gig economy, and they wanted more seasons out of this, so they're going to spin this in a Sabrina, Supernatural, Riverdale, Legion, Heroes direction.
Yeah, again, pretty sure that when they developed this, they really took a completely different angle on what the writer was actually going for.
Yeah, I'll be surprised to see. I'll be curious to see if they get greenlit for a second season. Not every comic book adaptation gets a following. October Faction didn't, and they definitely left that open for a second season, and it's not getting one. Not on Netflix, at least. So who knows? We will certainly see what happens. I'll give you the last word here. Anything else about the show?
We talk about how the series was so much better than the book. The actors were great. They all had wonderful chemistry. Sophia Lyles and Wyatt Olaf are terrific actors, and I'm so happy to see them continue to get work after it. I hate it when you see child actors just kind of come and disappear after 1 or 2 films. I like seeing that they're, talented enough that they can continue to get work. But if this does get a season 2, I'm not sure I really want to watch it.
Well, you have to. We have to cover it for a TV party.
Fine, then I'm doing it under duress.
Your duress is noted.
Yeah, like you care about duress. I have to hear about Robert's duress. Well, I used to have to hear about Robert's duress once a week.
See, you all complained about the schedule, and then the world fell apart, and then there was no schedule. See, God punishes you for complaining. And speaking of God punishing for complaining, Robert and I will be reviewing Castlevania Season 3 on TV Party, because I didn't want to do this fucking series in the first place, but everyone pitched it to me and were like, oh my god, Castlevania, and all the people who pitched it fucking have ditched out now.
Yeah, well, now your duress is noted.
And now me and Robert are stuck reviewing this piece of shit. So, Castlevania Season 3, it'll be lovely. I may or may not, depending on how I'm feeling, review the new Trivium album. I haven't decided yet. It's on the schedule. We'll see what happens. Next week, Pat and I will definitely be doing the next chapter in our trip to do heavyweight boxing. Cassius Clay, Muhammad Ali, has had to rescind his title because he would not show up for service in the military, and so he was stripped of his heavyweight title. And so now the WBA we'll have a elimination tournament to crown a new heavyweight champion. In addition to which, we'll be doing a TV party for Money in the Bank. And in theory, it's on the schedule. We'll see if it actually happens. Myself and Sean Comer will be doing a TV party for the High Fidelity series that was on Hulu. And then on Thursday, May 14th, we'll do an on-trial for the High Fidelity movie. In theory, these will happen. This was an idea he pitched. So hopefully he will show up for it.
Staying silent.
Yes, you are. If you're wondering what happened to the Golden Compass on trial, your guess is as good as mine. Moving on. If you've enjoyed Alexis Hejna, and really, why haven't you? Why wouldn't you? We will be doing a TV party for the final season of She-Ra and the Princess of Power on May 18th. The prodigal son, not prodigal, protagal.
Didn't you pronounce it protocol?
I spelled it protocol.
Yeah, you spelled it protocol, right?
Yep. Not a lot of oxygen to the brain these days. Myself and the protagal son and Robert Winfrey will be getting back together for Damn You Hollywood for another VOD release that is sending the AMC movie chain and the Regal movie chain into fits and starts. Against my will, by the way, we will be reviewing the animated movie Scoob.
You don't want to see Mark or listen to Mark Wahlberg voice Blue Falcon.
I mean,
Jason Isaacs voice Dick Dastardly.
I knew I was going to watch it because my son's a fan of this stuff, but there was no fucking way I wanted to talk about this. But hey, I am a man of the people, and the people demanded it, so I will be there for the people.
You can use it as an opportunity to talk about how AMC and Regal really need to get that stick out of there. I'm refusing to curse now because I can hear your son in the background.
All right, moving right along. We may or may not be reviewing the new Trick or Treat album. Depends on if It depends on if Jesse's back by then and how I'm feeling. But we will be doing a TV party for Dark Side of the Ring Season 2. That's myself and Pat. For those of you who listen to Larry's 411 on Wrestling podcast, I will be reviewing AEW Double or Nothing with him after the show concludes Saturday night, May 23rd. And so that'll be up, I would imagine, Sunday or Monday. And then Alexis Hejna and I are back again for another comic book, another source material. We're going to be looking at Book 9 of the Don Rosa, Uncle Scrooge, and Donald Duck comic, The Three Caballeros Ride Again. Tuesday, myself and Chris Bailey will be doing a TV party for AEW Double or Nothing. In theory, myself and Jesse Starcher will be reviewing the new Termion Catalot album, Global Warning. And then finally, Chris Bailey. Myself and Alexis Hejna will be doing a TV party for the Disney Plus series Legend of the Three Caballeros. So that fills out our May calendar. What do you got going on your side of the world, sister? It's May the 4th. I hear you're selling Star Wars stuff.
Yes, I am. We just have our brand new Jedi and Mandalorian Scrabble tile dangle earrings. We just got them online on our shops at Etsy and handmade at Amazon. As far as conventions go, right now everything is still canceled, but states are starting to lift their stay-at-home order. We are going to be keeping an eye on things. Supposedly by, I want to say June or July, the conventions are supposed to be starting up again unless we get a second wave of this nightmare. So just pay attention to us on Facebook and Twitter. We will be updating everyone on what the status is and where things are going. Until then, of course, you can still find everything on our online shops, and you can always find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. That's Honeysuckle Rose Creations, the intersection of geek and chic.
All right, and if you dig on this comic strip idea, the next comic strip will be June 9th. We will be doing a graphic novel to film adaptation for The Last Days of American Crime, another Netflix series, another Netflix property. they took the graphic novel and they made a movie out of it. So, might be doing that with Alexis if she's up for it. Might be doing that with Jesse if he's available. We'll see. Somebody's going to do this with me, goddammit. So, we will be doing... So that's the next comic strip, The Last Days of American Crime. The movie on Netflix and the book. So until then, thank you for joining us here on Comic Stripped. Be well, be safe, and behave.